Have you ever walked away from a job, not because you couldn't do it, but because someone made you feel small? That was Clara. She finally escaped the arrogant millionaire boss who crushed her confidence for 3 long years. She left everything behind, just to breathe again. But life has a way of circling back to the wounds we thought we'd healed. Because on her first week at a brand new job, a place that finally saw her talent, he walked in, her old boss. The man she'd sworn never to face again. And this time, he wasn't her supervisor, he was the new owner. In that moment, her heart froze. Not from fear, but from the question none of us ever want to ask. What do you do when the past you escaped now controls your future? Stay with me, this story cuts deeper than you think. Clara Mitchell stared at the blinking cursor on her monitor, each pulse a tiny drumbeat echoing the tension in her chest. The office was eerily quiet for a Tuesday morning, save for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional squeak of a rolling chair in the distance. Her resignation letter waited patiently on the screen, a single page of carefully chosen words that carried weeks of frustration and sleepless nights. She shifted in her chair, feeling the stiff leather protest under her weight. The temperature in the sleek, glass-walled office felt like a refrigerator, though the thermostat read 72 degrees. It wasn't the cold that gnawed at her, it was the oppressive atmosphere of Whitmore marketing. Every corner, every polished surface seemed to radiate the presence of Richard Caldwell, her boss, who had a way of making everyone in the room feel simultaneously small and inadequate. 3 years. 3 long, exhausting years of towing a line that kept moving, of defending creative work that was never quite good enough. And this morning's meeting had been the final straw. She could still hear Richard's voice slicing through the conference room, ere each word a calculated dagger. Clara, this is not strategic thinking. This is juvenile. I expected more from someone with your supposed experience. She clenched her fists under the desk, her knuckles whitening. It wasn't just the criticism, she had grown accustomed to that, but the way he said her name like it tasted bitter on his tongue, as if her very existence was an inconvenience. He had barely glanced at the campaign proposal she had spent 3 weeks perfecting. The effort, the late nights, the creative risks, all dismissed with a casual shrug. Clara exhaled slowly, letting her gaze drift to the framed photograph on her desk. A picture of her and her sister smiling on a sunny beach in California, a rare moment of carefree joy. It reminded her of the person she used to be before corporate politics and relentless criticism had chipped away at her confidence. She wanted that Clara back, the one who didn't question her own instincts every time she opened her mouth. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then hesitated, hovering like a bird, uncertain whether to take flight. "Dear Mr. Caldwell." The words were ready, precise, professional, devoid of the petty accusations she wanted to scribble in the margins. No snide remarks, no indulgent explanations, just a clear, firm statement of her intention to leave. "You look like someone just threw your coffee in your face," a voice said from behind her. Laura Simmons, her closest ally at Whitmore, leaned on the edge of Clara's desk, her dark eyes sharp and perceptive. Clara flinched instinctively, hiding the letter on the screen. I'm just finishing something," Clara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Something tells me it's not the Henderson account." Laura's lips quirked in that knowing way she always did. "You're really doing it, aren't you?" Clara swallowed. She wanted to nod, to laugh off the tension, but it all felt too heavy. 3 years of restraint, of swallowing, indignation, of shaping herself to fit into an impossible mold, it all led to this moment. She had planned every detail, her next move, the job offer, waiting the apartment she had chosen closer to the new office. Yet the finality of it made her stomach twist into tight knots. Before she could respond, the door to her office clicked open. Clara's heart jolted as a tall figure stepped in. Richard Caldwell, impeccable in his charcoal suit, hair precisely combed, eyes like sharp emerald knives scanning the room. Her chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to shrink, to erase herself from the space. "Clara," he said, voice calm, almost casual, though every inch of his posture radiated authority. "I was hoping we could discuss the Morrison proposal." She felt her fingers tighten around the mouse. The resignation letter, the words she had carefully typed, suddenly seemed like both her shield and her sword. She drew in a breath, steadying herself. "I actually wanted to meet with you about that," she said, keeping her voice even. Richard didn't wait for her to continue. He turned a swift pivot and moved toward the conference room, with the certainty of a man accustomed to bending the world to his will. Clara exhaled, a mixture of relief and frustration surging through her. Laura watched silently, her expression a mix of concern and encouragement. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. You could transfer departments, stay, but you're choosing freedom. Clara shook her head, determination hardening her features. No, Laura, I'm done. 3 years of doubt, 3 years of fighting to be seen, it's enough. I need a place where my work matters, where I'm respected for what I bring to the table. She returned to her desk, eyes locked on the screen. The letter stared back at her, innocuous yet monumental. Dear Mr. Caldwell, please accept this letter as my formal notice of resignation. 2 weeks from today. She read it silently once, twice, feeling each word land with weight. Finally, with a hand that trembled only slightly, she pressed the print button. The soft whirring of the printer echoed in the quiet office, the paper emerging like a tiny white flag of surrender, or perhaps a banner of liberation. Clara leaned back in her chair, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Yet liberation carried with it a twinge of fear. What would happen next? Would Richard react with fury, indifference? Would her colleagues whisper, judge, speculate? She couldn't know, and that uncertainty made her pulse race, even as a fragile thrill of empowerment bloomed in her chest. Her eyes drifted back to the photograph on her desk, the one of the sunny beach. Clara felt a flicker of hope amidst the anxiety. Maybe this was the beginning of something she had been waiting for, the reclaiming of herself after years of feeling small. And yet the shadow of doubt lingered. How much courage would it really take to step out, leave everything familiar and face the unknown? Clara pressed her palms into her lap, grounding herself in the reality of the moment. The hum of the office, the distant phone rings, the faint scrape of a chair, all ordinary sounds, yet today they carried the weight of a turning point. She had made her choice. She had struck the match. Now she had to walk forward, even if the path was uncharted, even if the fire she had lit might singe her along the way. And as she rose from her chair folder, clutched tightly against her chest, a single emotion hung in the air, the fragile, thrilling, terrifying taste of freedom, waiting just beyond the office door. Clara Mitchell moved quietly around her office, careful not to draw attention. Each item, she touched her favorite coffee mug, a small stack of neatly organized folders, a photo frame of her sister smiling under the California sun, felt like a piece of her life she was packing into a cardboard box. The office around her buzzed with muted conversation and keyboard clicks, but she felt detached, as if she were moving through a dream. Laura Simmons, perched on the edge of her own desk, just a few feet away, kept glancing at her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "You're really doing this," she said softly, her voice almost drowned out by the hum of the fluorescent lights. No backup plan, no safety net. Clara didn't respond immediately. Her fingers lingered over a set of pens she had collected over the years, gifts from colleagues, small tokens of appreciation. Even in this cold corporate environment, there had been moments that reminded her why she loved marketing, why she had chosen this career. She picked up one pen and twirled it between her fingers, savoring the memory. "I've been thinking about it for months," she finally said. Her voice was calm, almost serene, though her heart raced under her blouse. "It's not reckless. I have savings, I have skills. And most importantly, I have to do this for me." Laura leaned back, shaking her head, a wry smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "I admire you, Clara, but you're stepping off a cliff. Whitmore looks good on a resume, and you're trading that certainty for a gamble." Clara's gaze drifted to the corner of the room where the sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across the carpet. In that light, the office that had been her daily battlefield for 3 years looked almost like a stage, each desk and chair a prop in a play where she had been forced to perform at her lowest confidence. She remembered the early days, arriving eager and hopeful, ready to impress, to contribute, only to be met with scorn, micromanagement, and relentless criticism. The memory brought a faint, bitter smile to her lips. She could hear Richard Caldwell's voice cutting across countless meetings. "Clara, that's not how professionals handle this. Are you sure you understand what I'm asking?" Every critique, every dismissal, every condescending remark had chipped away at her self-assurance. Yet beneath the frustration and humiliation, she had survived, adapted, and even excelled in ways that he refused to acknowledge. Her fingers brushed over a small journal tucked into a drawer, a record of minor triumphs, lessons learned, and moments of pride she had silently documented. The Henderson campaign's unexpected success, the praise from clients, the innovative approach she had proposed that had quietly transformed a struggling account. These memories reminded her of her capability. She had achieved despite the obstacles, not because of the approval of a boss who had never been satisfied. Laura watched her silently, sensing the storm of emotion beneath the composed exterior. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" she asked. Clara nodded, closing the journal gently and tucking it into the box. "I have. It's terrifying, yes. But staying here, it's worse. Every morning, walking into this office felt like a battle I couldn't win no matter how hard I tried. It's exhausting, and it's not worth it anymore. The office clock ticked, a steady reminder of the time she was spending on the brink of change. She moved around methodically, packing the few personal items that had given her comfort during long nights and early mornings. A mug with a crack she had refused to throw away, a framed picture of a quiet morning at the beach, a stack of notes from colleagues who had become friends. Despite the environment, they all went into the box with care. Each item symbolized the life she had built here, even if it had been under constant scrutiny. Laura reached out, placing a hand lightly on Clara's arm. You know, if you change your mind, there's always room for negotiation. Maybe a transfer, a new project. Clara shook her head, a quiet smile playing on her lips. No, it's too late for compromises. I've stayed long enough to know what this place can be, and it isn't what I need. It's not worth sacrificing my sense of self for a title or a paycheck. A subtle fear fluttered in her chest, a whisper of uncertainty about what the future would bring. She didn't have another office to walk into yet, didn't know exactly what the people at Horizon Innovations were like, didn't know if her skills would be valued in a new environment. The unknown stretched before her like a vast open ocean, exciting and terrifying all at once. And yet that fear was tempered by determination. Clara had survived 3 years under a boss who seemed to thrive on crushing others' confidence. She had navigated office politics, delivered measurable results, and preserved her integrity. If she could endure all that, she could face the uncertainty ahead. Her thoughts drifted to the small victories she had claimed quietly, moments when she had proven herself, when a client had smiled in appreciation of her insight, when a campaign had exceeded expectations. These memories, juxtaposed with the constant criticism she had endured, crystallized a simple truth: she had earned the right to leave to claim her freedom. Clara paused, looking around the office one last time. She noticed the glint of sunlight on the polished glass surfaces, the faint hum of computers, the rhythm of keyboards typing a language she had come to know too well. In this familiar, oppressive setting, she had been both diminished and refined, shaped by challenge and adversity. She felt a pang of nostalgia for the person she had been, the eager, idealistic Clara, intertwined with a fierce pride in the person she had become, resilient, perceptive, unbowed. With a final deliberate motion, she closed the cardboard box, securing the flaps with tape. The simple act felt monumental, a physical manifestation of the boundary she was drawing between past and future. She would walk out of Whitmore Marketing with her head held high, carrying the lessons, the victories, and the memories that had shaped her, but leaving behind the toxicity that had stifled her spirit. Laura gave her a long, lingering look. "You're sure about this?" she said softly, more a statement than a question. Clara met her gaze, steady and unwavering. "Yes," she said quietly, with the calm certainty of someone who had weighed the risks and accepted them. "I'm sure. It's time I stopped shrinking myself for someone else's ego. It's time I stepped into the space I deserve, wherever that may be." She lifted the box, feeling its weight and the weight of the years it represented. Each step to the elevator was deliberate, a rhythm, marking the end of one chapter and the tentative beginning of another. As the doors closed behind her, the office, a place that had been her battleground, receded from view, leaving behind both shadows and lessons. And somewhere in that quiet, suspended space between departure and arrival, Clara felt the faint stirrings of hope, tempered by the tremor of uncertainty, the first flutter of freedom, still fragile, still untested. Clara Mitchell paused at the revolving glass doors of Horizon Innovations, taking a slow, deliberate breath. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the lobby and bouncing off the pale green walls, the carefully curated local art and the occasional glint of stainless steel accents. The energy in the air was different here, lighter, vibrant, almost electric. She could hear the soft hum of conversation, punctuated by laughter, brainstorming chatter, and the clatter of keyboards. She stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the polished hardwood floors, and immediately felt a twinge of disbelief. After 3 years at Whitmore Marketing, where creativity had been measured and often dismissed, this felt like stepping into another world entirely. The open-plan office spread before her like a breath of fresh air, unencumbered by the sterile rigidity of her former environment. "Welcome, you must be Clara," a warm voice said, cutting through her reverie. Clara turned to see a woman approaching mid-stride, her demeanor relaxed yet commanding. Elise Graham, the creative director, extended a hand, her smile genuine and welcoming. Clara felt an immediate sense of ease, though her nerves hummed just beneath the surface. "Yes, I'm Clara," she replied, shaking Elise's hand. The handshake was firm, confident, without the cold precision she had come to associate with her previous boss. Elise's eyes sparkled with curiosity and recognition, as if she could already see the ideas brewing beneath Clara's calm exterior. "Let me show you around," Elise said, gesturing toward the heart of the office. Clara followed her eyes, drinking in every detail. The walls were painted in soothing blues and muted greens, punctuated by local artwork, abstract paintings, landscape photographs, and a few handcrafted sculptures. Each piece seemed chosen not just for aesthetic appeal but to spark imagination. Employees moved with purpose, yet there was a sense of playful energy, collaboration over competition, conversation over isolation. Clara noticed clusters of staff gathered around screens, debating ideas, sketching on whiteboards, and gesturing animatedly. No one seemed anxious or withdrawn. She felt a pang of longing for the years she had spent under the oppressive gaze of Richard Caldwell, where every meeting had felt like a test she could never fully pass. Here the air seemed lighter, freer, and it wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. "This is the main collaborative area," Elise explained, guiding her through the space. "We encourage idea sharing at every level. No hierarchy gets in the way of creativity here. Grab a coffee anytime. You'll notice it's not just a perk, it's part of the culture." She gestured toward a sleek espresso machine on a side counter where a few employees were preparing their drinks with quiet laughter. Clara allowed herself a small smile, stepping closer to the counter. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled her senses, something she hadn't realized she had missed so deeply. At Whitmore, the break room had been a sterile afterthought. Here it was, a hub of energy, a place where ideas could be sparked casually over a latte. Elise led her to a workstation near a large window that overlooked a small city park. Sunlight spilled across the desk, illuminating a small potted plant and an adjustable height desk that seemed to invite comfort and creativity. "This will be yours," Elise said. "We like natural light for everyone. It keeps the mind sharp." Clara ran her fingers over the smooth surface, absorbing the warmth, the intentionality behind every detail. As she unpacked a few personal items from the cardboard box she had carried in, Clara felt the weight of the past few weeks, months really begin to lift. Here she wouldn't be constantly second-guessing herself. Her skills, her perspective, her ideas, they would be seen, heard, and valued. Elise leaned against the edge of the desk, her tone gentle but excited. "I've been following your work from Whitmore. Some of your campaigns were quietly brilliant. I think you'll fit right in here, and I'm thrilled to mentor you." Clara blinked, a rush of warmth flooding her chest. The word mentor carried none of the condescension she had known for years. It promised guidance, growth, and respect. She allowed herself a deep, quiet breath, savoring the relief that coursed through her. For the first time in what felt like ages, she wasn't bracing for criticism, for dismissal, for an ego to assert itself at every corner. Instead, she was stepping into a space that felt alive, supportive, and intrinsically designed to foster her strengths. As the morning passed, Clara met her new colleagues, designers, writers, strategists, all engaged in vibrant, respectful exchanges. She noticed the way they listened to one another, debated ideas without defensiveness, and celebrated each small victory. It was intoxicating, invigorating, and almost surreal. She realized how starved she had been for this kind of environment, how years of suppressed creativity had dulled her excitement for her craft. Sitting at her desk, Clara opened her laptop, ready to dive into her first assignments. The sunlight warmed her shoulders, the buzz of activity around her felt like a gentle pulse of life, and a small, almost shy smile crept across her face. "I haven't felt this inspired in years," she thought, her heart swelling with both relief and a quiet exhilaration. A colleague paused nearby, offering her a friendly nod. "You're Clara, right? Elise mentioned you'd be starting today. Excited to have you on board." Clara nodded, warmth threading through her chest. This simple acknowledgement, genuine, unforced, was a sharp contrast to the environment she had left behind. As the morning unfolded, Clara found herself taking notes, asking questions, and offering suggestions, her curiosity reignited. The hum of collaborative energy, the subtle laughter, and the visible appreciation for input all combined into a sensation she hadn't realized she'd been craving: belonging. By lunchtime, she leaned back in her chair, watching the sunlight dance on the green-painted walls. She allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. She had stepped away from Whitmore marketing, from a boss who had stifled her growth, and into a space that seemed almost designed to nurture her potential. The relief was profound, but mingled with a subtle, lingering awareness She had to prove herself in this new environment to earn trust and respect without relying on past credentials. Still, for the first time in years, she felt hope. She felt curiosity, the thrill of possibility, and the quiet confidence that comes from aligning one's work with a place that values what you bring. The tension that had weighed on her shoulders for so long seemed to loosen, replaced by an eagerness she hadn't felt since her earliest days in marketing. Clara glanced around at the bustling office once more, noticing small interactions, whispered jokes, and creative sparks flying between desks. She felt an intoxicating blend of awe and anticipation. This is exactly what I needed, she thought, a surge of gratitude threading through the initial nervousness. And as she reached for her coffee, the warmth of the mug in her hands grounding her in the present, she realized just how long it had been since she had felt this alive at work. But in the back of her mind, a quiet thought lingered. The challenges ahead were real, and her past had taught her that even the most promising environments could hold unexpected obstacles. Somewhere beyond the walls of this sunlit office, a new chapter awaited, and Clara Mitchell was ready to step fully into it, though she didn't yet know exactly what surprises, tests, or triumphs were about to come. Clara Mitchell sat upright at her new desk, the sunlight streaming through the large window, illuminating the neat rows of creative sketches and client briefs she had laid out in front of her. Today marked her first real challenge at Horizon Innovations, a high-stakes marketing campaign for a luxury real estate client, one whose visibility could make or break the office's reputation in the city. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, a familiar mix of nerves and exhilaration tightening in her chest. Elise Graham approached quietly, a reassuring presence at Clara's side. "This is a big one," Elise said softly, leaning over to glance at the documents. "I've seen your approach before. Creative, strategic, meticulous. You're ready for this." Clara nodded, absorbing both the weight of the responsibility and the subtle confidence Elise had in her. The contrast with Whitmore Marketing was immediate and palpable. Here she was expected to excel, not feared for doing so. She opened her presentation software, her fingers gliding across the keyboard as she began outlining her vision. She wanted this campaign to tell a story, to connect emotionally with the potential buyers, rather than just present cold statistics about square footage and amenities. Every detail, the images, the phrasing, the timing, had to feel authentic, aspirational, yet approachable. As she worked, colleagues drifted past her desk, some stopping to glance at her layouts, others asking thoughtful questions. "Clara, I love what you're doing with the hero images," said Marcus, one of the senior designers. "Have you considered adding the community aspect into the social media teaser series?" Clara paused, impressed by the constructive nature of the feedback. Here, questions weren't criticisms, they were building blocks for collaboration. She smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of validation seep into her chest. This was new, unfamiliar territory, a place where her experience was recognized, her instincts trusted, and her creative voice encouraged. She allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction before diving back into work with renewed focus. By mid-morning, she had compiled a preliminary campaign deck outlining visuals, messaging, and strategic touchpoints. Elise returned to her side, scanning the slides carefully. Her expression shifted from interest to genuine admiration. "Clara, this is impressive. You've captured the essence of the property and its lifestyle in a way that resonates. Let's present this in the team meeting. You'll lead the discussion." Clara's pulse quickened. Leading a presentation on her first major assignment could have been intimidating anywhere, but here the tone was supportive, not threatening. Her colleagues gathered around the conference table, some leaning forward with curiosity, others seated with attentive anticipation. Clara's eyes met theirs briefly, feeling the trust and openness in their expressions. For the first time in years, she didn't feel judged or belittled, she felt seen. As she walked the team through her concepts, she noticed nods of agreement, thoughtful murmurs, and even moments of enthusiastic laughter at her clever visual analogies. Questions came, but they were constructive, probing, and collaborative rather than demeaning. Clara answered with clarity, referencing data market, research, and strategic rationale. Every response was met with acknowledgement and appreciation. She felt a swell of cautious optimism rising inside her. She was trusted here. Her expertise mattered. Her decisions influenced the campaign, and her contributions were not only recognized but actively valued. The difference from Whitmore Marketing was stark in her former office. Her ideas would have been interrupted, dismissed, or quietly undermined. Here they were celebrated, refined, and amplified. After the meeting, Elise pulled Clara aside. "You handled that beautifully," she said. "You didn't just present ideas, you inspired confidence. I can see already that the team respects your perspective, and that respect is mutual. Clara exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. This validation, subtle yet profound, reinforced her decision to leave the old environment behind. Throughout the afternoon, Clara continued refining the campaign, integrating feedback and brainstorming additional touchpoints. She found herself laughing softly with colleagues over a playful debate about tagline options, exchanging ideas without fear of ridicule. Her creativity felt unshackled, and every small success, each nod, each appreciative glance, each collaborative adjustment fueled her confidence. Her mind wandered briefly to Richard Caldwell, recalling how a similar presentation at Whitmore would have been met with a scornful sigh, a pointed question designed to trip her up, or a thinly veiled criticism of her judgment. She shook her head, smiling at the memory now tinged with irony. The environment had been oppressive, yes, but it had also forged resilience. It had prepared her to excel when the opportunity truly mattered. By late afternoon, the campaign deck was polished, complete with visuals, narrative arcs, and a clear rollout plan. Elise returned for a final review. "Clara, I think we're ready to pitch this to the client. You've earned their attention, and their trust will follow once they see this." The simple acknowledgement sent a warm surge through her chest. The anxiety that had lingered at Whitmore was replaced with a quiet, steady anticipation. Clara glanced around the office once more, the soft blue and green walls now feeling like a sanctuary of creativity. Colleagues moved around her with ease, offering feedback, sharing insights, and supporting each other in ways she had never known possible. Each interaction reinforced the sense that she was no longer a solitary combatant in a corporate war, but part of a team that valued her. As she gathered her notes for the client presentation, she felt the flutter of excitement mixed with cautious optimism. Her heart was light, yet aware the stakes were real, the expectations high, and her performance mattered. But unlike before, the pressure was invigorating rather than paralyzing. Clara leaned back in her chair for a moment, closing her eyes briefly to savor the sense of being trusted, respected, and empowered. She felt a subtle, compelling thrill, the realization that she had not only escaped a toxic environment but had stepped into a place that could nurture her potential. The small victories of today felt monumental because they were earned through skill, integrity, and the courage to embrace change. Yet beneath the triumph, a faint pulse of tension lingered. She knew that bigger challenges were coming, that the client's expectations could test her limits, and that she would have to navigate new pressures without the familiar shadows of her past. That uncertainty, however, was no longer fear, it was the spark of possibility. And so, as the afternoon light softened through the office windows, Clara Mitchell sat poised at her desk, heart racing with excitement, mind alive with ideas and spirit, quietly triumphant, fully aware that the journey ahead was just beginning. Clara Mitchell leaned back in her chair, sipping the last dregs of her latte when the soft ping of her email notification cut through the ambient chatter of Horizon Innovation's office. She glanced at the screen, expecting a routine message from Elise or a reminder for the afternoon brainstorming session. But the subject line froze her mid-breath. Horizon Innovation's acquisition, Sterling Enterprises integration meeting. Today, 2 p.m. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad as her mind processed the words, Sterling Enterprises. The name felt jagged, like shards of glass pressed against her chest. She blinked, thinking she must have misread. Sterling Enterprises, her old company's parent organization. The letters danced on the screen as if teasing her a cruel echo of memories she had fought to leave behind. A chill ran through her. Clara's heart raced, a rhythm of panic building beneath her skin. She opened the email, fully eyes, scanning for details for reassurance that this wasn't what it appeared to be. And then it hit her like a hammer to the chest. Listed as part of the integration leadership was Richard Caldwell, her former boss, the man whose arrogance and relentless critiques had made every morning at Whitmore Marketing feel like walking through a gauntlet. The world seemed to tilt slightly. She could feel the blood drain from her face, replaced by a knot of disbelief. Richard Caldwell, Senior VP of Strategic Operations, would now have oversight of the very company that had promised her freedom, creativity, and respect. Clara's breath caught slow and uneven. Her fingers clenched around the edge of her desk. The hum of the office faded into background noise. The collaborative energy, the sunlight dancing across the soft green walls, even Elise's encouraging presence. All of it was temporarily eclipsed by the sudden, unbearable weight of the email. She read it again, each word sharper than the last. Sterling Enterprises has acquired Horizon Innovations, integration meetings to be scheduled. Senior leadership oversight includes Richard Caldwell, former Whitmore marketing executive. Her mind reeled. She had meticulously avoided him for months, built a life of professional respect and creative freedom, and now the man she had spent years escaping was back in her orbit, embedded in the corporate structure, wielding authority over the very projects she had begun to call her own. Clara pushed her chair slightly back, letting her head fall into her hands. She felt a rush of conflicting emotions: fear, anger, disbelief, a flicker of betrayal. How had this happened? Why now? She recalled every morning she had spent defending herself against his sharp criticisms, every late night doubting her own instincts, every moment of humiliation disguised as constructive feedback. The memories were vivid, raw, and entirely unwelcome. A quiet voice beside her snapped her to the present. "Clara, everything okay?" Elise's tone was soft, concerned. Clara lifted her head slowly, forcing a neutral expression that did little to disguise the storm inside her. I just read the email," she admitted, voice tight. Elise's brow furrowed slightly, scanning the message herself. Her expression shifted from curiosity to subtle reassurance. Okay, I can see why that's unsettling." Clara exhaled shakily, trying to gather composure. "Unsettling is one word for it," she said, letting a small bitter smile curve her lips. The image of Richard Caldwell's hawkish green eyes, his meticulously tailored suits, the way he had once belittled her, every idea filled her mind unbidden. And now the stakes were higher. She wasn't just navigating her own career anymore. She was navigating her creative freedom, the trust she had begun to build with her new colleagues, and the very culture of the office she had grown to love. Elise placed a calming hand on Clara's shoulder. "Look, I don't want to downplay it, but Sterling Enterprises' parent oversight doesn't necessarily mean Richard is going to micromanage us the way he did at Whitmore. They're known for letting their subsidiaries maintain operational independence." Clara nodded, though it did little to soothe the unease threading through her chest. Her mind raced with contingencies. Could she hide her anxiety? Could she navigate interactions with him professionally, without unraveling the confidence she had worked so hard to rebuild? And what if he remembered her the way he had always remembered her, an employee to intimidate, to control, to belittle? Her gaze drifted to the window, where sunlight continued to spill across the office floor, catching on the edges of the vibrant artwork and casting long, hopeful shadows. In contrast to the panic constricting her chest, a quiet determination began to stir. She had survived Whitmore. She had found a space that valued her, nurtured her creativity, and restored her sense of professional pride. Surely she could navigate this challenge too. And yet the uncertainty lingered. She couldn't ignore the knot of dread twisting her stomach at the thought of Richard Caldwell stepping into the room, overseeing meetings, influencing decisions, and perhaps remembering the versions of herself she had worked so hard to leave behind. Clara set her jaw and straightened in her chair, reaching for her notebook. She began making notes, strategies for maintaining composure, potential scenarios for interaction, ways to assert her voice without conflict. Each idea she wrote down brought a small measure of calm, a sense of control in an otherwise uncontrollable situation. Still, the truth remained. This was the man she had left behind, now unexpectedly returned in a position of authority over her present. Her stomach churned, her heart pounded, and her mind refused to settle. She had faced challenges before: long nights of presentation, prep clients with impossible demands, campaigns hanging by a thread, but nothing had prepared her for this. A glance at Elise revealed her mentor, observing quietly, patient but alert, sensing the shift in Clara's demeanor. Clara gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledging the shared understanding the next few weeks would require vigilance, poise, and the unshakable application of all the skills she had cultivated in her escape from Whitmore. As the office buzzed around her, the email remained open on her screen, glowing with the words that had overturned her sense of security. Her palms rested flat on the desk, gripping the edges slightly as her mind raced through possibilities, anticipations, and what-ifs. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply sit in disbelief, to feel the tension knotting in her chest, the shock of seeing a past adversary re-emerge. Then she closed her eyes briefly, grounding herself with the knowledge that she had survived worse, had grown stronger, and had found allies who valued her insight and creativity. This was a challenge she could not ignore, but one she could meet. And yet, even with that resolve, a quiet, uneasy tremor lingered. Clara Mitchell realized that her past had not fully released its hold. The man she had escaped was back, and the game had just begun. The conference room buzzed softly with low murmurs and the occasional scrape of chairs against the polished floor. Clara Mitchell slipped quietly into the back row, careful to keep her posture low and her presence inconspicuous. Her notebook rested on her lap, pen poised, but her mind was elsewhere, trapped in a spiral of unease that tightened around her chest like a vice. This was the first company-wide meeting since the Sterling Enterprises acquisition. Every employee, from the newest intern to the senior project leads, had gathered to hear the integration plan. The air was heavy with anticipation, excitement, and just a hint of trepidation. Clara had walked into this office with optimism, but now that optimism was tempered by the shadow of the email she had read earlier. Richard Caldwell strode into the room with a quiet authority that demanded attention without even trying. His sharp green eyes scanned the group as he paused near the podium. Time seemed to slow for Clara. The hum of fluorescent lights, the subtle whisper of the ventilation, even the faint tapping of a colleague's pen became amplified in her heightened state of awareness. She kept her gaze low, focusing on the pen in her hand, silently willing herself to disappear into the background. But fate had other plans. As Richard's gaze swept across the room, it landed briefly on her. Clara felt a jolt, her pulse spiking instantly. That familiar weight of scrutiny, the same meticulous observation that had once made her stomach tighten in dread, settled over her again. His eyes lingered for a heartbeat longer than necessary, the flicker of recognition unmistakable. Clara's throat tightened and a rush of suppressed anger surged beneath her calm exterior. How dare he, after everything, to appear here, sitting in a position of authority over the work she now loved. She forced herself to exhale slowly to ground her racing heart, but the tension pulsed through her veins like an electric current. The CEO of Sterling Enterprises, a poised woman with silver-streaked hair and commanding presence, began the meeting with warm words of welcome. "We are thrilled to have Horizon Innovations as part of our family," she began. "Your team has already shown remarkable innovation, and we look forward to supporting your growth while preserving your creative independence." Applause rippled through the room, but Clara's attention remained fixed on Richard, noting the subtle, calculated manner in which he adjusted his tie, the slight narrowing of his eyes as he observed the assembled staff. Elise leaned toward Clara, whispering, "Don't let him rattle you. He's just assessing, not attacking." Clara nodded subtly, but her stomach still churned. The last 3 years of her professional life had been a series of mental gymnastics designed to anticipate his criticisms, defend her work, and preserve her dignity. Now that past once behind her seemed to have been carried forward into the present. Richard stepped to the podium, his voice calm, measured, but carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Good afternoon, everyone. As part of the integration, I'll be overseeing operational alignment between our companies to ensure that we maintain excellence across all departments." His gaze swept the room briefly, resting on Clara again. She felt an almost imperceptible tension in the air between them, a silent acknowledgement of shared history. Clara's hands gripped her notebook more tightly. The old instinct to shrink to anticipate judgment flared. She could feel her pulse quickening, every nerve alert, every sense sharpened, and yet beneath the anxiety a spark of defiance burned. She had survived him before. She had grown stronger, more confident, and her skills had earned genuine recognition here. She would not cower. As Richard outlined the integration timeline, detailing which divisions would collaborate and how oversight would be managed, Clara caught herself analyzing each word, each nuance. Was he still the same man who had torn down her work without offering guidance? Or was this a new, measured professional approach? Every sentence, every pause, every glance from him set her mind racing, her emotions teetering between vigilance and suppressed anger. The room seemed to contract around her awareness. Chairs shifted softly, whispers floated at the edges of her consciousness, but all of it paled in comparison to the tension coiling in her chest. She could feel the old power dynamic trying to assert itself, and she resisted it with every ounce of calm she could muster. At one point, Richard paused mid-sentence, scanning the team for reactions. His eyes found hers again, holding it just long enough for the memory of past critiques to flicker across her mind. The corners of his mouth tightened almost imperceptibly, a fleeting shadow of the arrogance she had known so well. Clara felt a surge of heat rise in her cheeks, a mixture of anger and disbelief. This was the man she had fled, and yet here he was calm, composed, observing, evaluating. She focused on her breathing, slow and deliberate, grounding herself in the knowledge that the environment was different now. Here she had allies, here she had autonomy, and yet she could not shake the feeling that the meeting had become a delicate minefield where every glance, every gesture carried weight. By the end of the presentation, the room erupted in polite applause. Colleagues whispered among themselves the excitement of new resources, integration plans, and creative opportunities flowing through the space. Clara allowed herself a measured exhale, keeping her back straight, her expression neutral. She had survived the first encounter, but the knowledge that Richard Caldwell now had oversight, subtle, structural, unavoidable, left her heart racing and her mind alert. As people filed out of the conference room, Clara remained seated a moment longer, letting the chatter fade to background hum. The knot in her stomach refused to dissipate entirely. She knew the coming weeks would demand vigilance, patience, and a careful balance between asserting her expertise and navigating his presence. The uncertainty, the lingering tension was palpable. An unspoken question hovering in the air: would history repeat itself, or could she navigate this new dynamic without compromise? And as she rose, gathering her notes and adjusting her bag, Clara felt the pulse of anxiety mixed with determination. She had survived his scrutiny before. She had grown, adapted, and earned respect in a place that valued her. But now the man she had fled was back in her professional orbit, and the stakes had just been raised. Her pulse quickened as she stepped into the hallway, a quiet, simmering anger beneath her calm exterior, leaving her wondering exactly what the next encounter would hold. Clara Mitchell entered the conference room with a sense of quiet resolve. Her team had gathered laptops, open notes at the ready, all eager to discuss the preliminary strategy for the Jensen campaign. The hum of the overhead lights blended with the low murmur of collaboration, a sound she had grown to find comforting. But today, the comforting energy was punctuated by an undercurrent of tension. Richard Caldwell was present. He sat at the head of the table, reviewing a neatly organized folder, his green eyes scanning the room with meticulous attention. Clara felt that familiar rush of unease, part reflex, part memory, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the work before her. This was her domain, her expertise, and she had no intention of ceding control. "Let's begin," Richard said, his voice calm and measured, lacking the sharp edge she remembered. "I've reviewed the initial outline. Clara, please walk us through your approach." Clara's throat felt dry for a moment, but she straightened her spine and met his gaze directly. "Certainly. Our objective is to reposition Jensen's flagship product line, to highlight its unique benefits in lifestyle integration rather than just technical specifications. We'll target consumer engagement through storytelling and experiential campaigns that emphasize real-world applications." She spoke deliberately, confident in her research, aware of the analytical framework supporting her strategy. Richard listened, nodding slightly, making occasional notes but without interrupting, a marked contrast to the interruptions that had once defined every meeting with him. As she detailed her plan, presenting slides and walking through projected engagement metrics, she observed subtle changes. Richard's critiques were precise, professional, and analytical rather than dismissive. "Your segmentation model is thorough," he remarked, "though I'd like to see sensitivity analyses for the different demographic cohorts. Some of the projections may be optimistic, without adjusting for regional variations." Clara acknowledged his point, appreciating the constructive approach. "Agreed. I've already begun gathering regional data, and we can incorporate that into the model to refine our projections." The exchange felt almost normal, professional, collaborative. She allowed herself a flicker of cautious optimism, but a small voice in her mind reminded her history had not always been so kind. Throughout the discussion, Clara maintained a balance between presenting her strategy confidently and allowing space for Richard's input. She noticed that his comments were no longer designed to intimidate or assert authority. Instead, they reflected genuine curiosity and engagement. He asked questions to clarify, to explore, rather than to undermine. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but Clara could feel it, and it made her pulse quicken in a different way, less from fear, more from intrigue. When the team reached a potential roadblock regarding media allocation, Clara suggested a phased approach to testing channels before full-scale investment. Richard considered her proposal, carefully nodding once. "That's a sound strategy," he said. "It mitigates risk while providing actionable insights. I support moving forward with your recommendation." The words were almost shocking in their normalcy. Clara caught herself studying his expression, searching for any trace of the old arrogance or condescension. There was none. Instead, she saw a professional poised to support the team, while maintaining oversight, a leader exercising judgment rather than domination. As the meeting progressed, Clara found herself adjusting to this new dynamic. She realized she could assert her expertise without the automatic tension that had once accompanied every interaction with Richard. She made a conscious effort to speak clearly, set boundaries where necessary, and delegate responsibility confidently. Each successful assertion reinforced her sense of agency, a quiet triumph she allowed herself to savor. At one point, a junior associate asked a clarifying question about projected ROI. Clara responded, then glanced at Richard, expecting a critique or interruption. Instead, he gave a subtle nod, silently affirming her response. It was a moment of validation that would have been impossible under the old dynamic, and Clara felt a spark of cautious optimism. Perhaps this change was genuine. Perhaps it was not just circumstance, but a real shift in approach. The meeting concluded with clear action items, timelines, and shared understanding. Clara felt a measure of relief and satisfaction, but the unease lingered, suspense hovering like a thin mist. Was this a new Richard, truly capable of collaboration, or merely a temporary adjustment, or an experiment in politeness, until the pressures of authority reasserted themselves? The question remained unanswered, hanging in the room like a quiet tremor. As her colleagues filtered out of the room, Clara lingered for a moment, reviewing the notes she had taken. Her hands rested lightly on the table, steady now, more assured. She had navigated the first test of professional interaction under Richard Caldwell without compromising her boundaries or confidence. It was a small victory, but an essential one, a signal that she could assert herself while maintaining a working relationship with someone who had once loomed over her like a shadow. Stepping out into the hallway, she drew a slow, deliberate breath. The soft light from the windows illuminated the corridor, casting long, serene shadows that seemed to mirror the guarded optimism she felt within. She knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead would demand patience, vigilance, and continued courage. But for the first time in weeks, Clara Mitchell felt a measure of balance, restored an equilibrium between assertiveness and observation, between anticipation and calm. Her pulse had slowed, slightly replaced by a subtle hum of focus and determination. She had faced the first confrontation not with panic, not with avoidance, but with competence and composure. And yet the question that lingered in her mind, quiet but persistent, would follow her through the coming days. Was this newfound professionalism genuine or a prelude to the familiar storm? As she returned to her office, notebook in hand, she allowed herself a brief smile. The tension was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but she had begun to navigate it. For now, that was enough. The suspense remained, and with it, the promise of growth, discovery, and the delicate dance of professional reinvention. The office felt charged, almost electric, as Clara Mitchell rushed into the emergency strategy room. Screens flickered with real-time social media feedback and internal project dashboards. The Jensen account, a marquee client for Horizon Innovations, was in crisis. Delays in the product rollout had triggered negative press coverage, amplified by online chatter, and the CEO of Jensen had demanded an immediate plan for damage control. Clara's heart pounded, her fingers brushing rapidly over her tablet as she scanned the latest metrics. She could hear the low hum of the office, punctuated by the occasional sharp keystroke, a visual echo of the tension coursing through the team. Elise Graham, always composed, had already gathered the core members, but the arrival of Richard Caldwell cast a shadow over the room. His presence was magnetic and slightly intimidating. He carried authority effortlessly, yet today there was something different, a subtle restraint in his posture, a measured calm in his movements. Clara's pulse spiked as their eyes met briefly, that old reflexive shiver of anxiety surfacing before she pushed it down. This was a high-stakes moment. Every word, every decision mattered. "Let's assess the situation," Richard said, voice clear, commanding attention without aggression. Clara noticed the absence of condescension. There was no immediate judgment, only focus. He gestured for her to begin. Clara swallowed and took a breath. The delays originated from two production bottlenecks. She began pointing to the dashboard on the screen. One in logistics, one in vendor approvals. The negative publicity is largely driven by incomplete messaging on social media, which we can immediately address with a rapid response content campaign. I've outlined a phased approach to mitigate risk and restore client confidence. Richard listened intently, nodding occasionally. "I see," he said. "And your proposed timeline?" She explained the accelerated rollout, noting the additional staff hours required, the strategic reallocation of resources, and a small contingency fund for unexpected challenges. Her voice carried both urgency and clarity. She could feel the team leaning in, trusting her guidance. For a moment, the weight of the room pressed on her shoulders. The client's displeasure, the looming threat to the company's reputation, the unspoken history with Richard all converged. Clara felt the familiar tug of tension, that quicksand of fear and anticipation she had navigated for years under his former management. But this time she was not alone. Richard interjected gently but decisively. "Clara, I want you to handle the communication strategy. I'll speak with Jensen directly regarding operational delays. Your team's work has been impeccable. These setbacks are external factors not reflective of your management." Clara froze, heart skipping. He was shielding her. For the first time, the man who had once undermined her at every turn was actively protecting her and her team. A mixture of disbelief and cautious relief surged through her alongside a bubbling sense of gratitude. Could this really be happening? Could someone truly change so fundamentally? The meeting intensified as team members raised questions about logistics, press releases, and client communication. Clara coordinated smoothly, delegating responsibilities, making rapid decisions, and incorporating suggestions in real time. Richard remained present, but non-intrusive, offering guidance only when necessary and consistently deferring to Clara's expertise. The atmosphere was electric, each second brimming with tension. Clara felt the rush of adrenaline sharpen her focus, calculating risks, anticipating outcomes, and making confident calls that might have seemed reckless if not executed precisely. Yet despite the pressure, there was a sense of cohesion she had never experienced under Richard's previous management. The team was rallying, empowered and resilient, buoyed by Clara's clarity and Richard's unexpected support. At one point, an urgent notification flashed on the screen. A media outlet had misrepresented a delay as incompetence. Clara hesitated, caught in the instant of panic, until Richard leaned forward. "Allow her to respond," he said, addressing the room. "She understands the narrative better than anyone. Let's trust her judgment." Clara's fingers moved swiftly, drafting a corrective press release and coordinating social media messaging. The team followed her lead, executing the plan flawlessly. She stole a quick glance at Richard, whose green eyes held a steady, approving gaze, not a flicker of superiority, no hint of the old critical scrutiny. It was respect, genuine respect. As the plan unfolded, the room's tension gradually shifted to controlled urgency. Each milestone reached, each problem addressed, reinforced Clara's belief that the crisis could be managed. She felt a thrill of empowerment, a validation of her skills, and an unspoken acknowledgement that the relationship dynamics had changed. The old Richard, the man who had torn down ideas and undermined confidence, was gone, replaced by someone capable of trust and protective leadership. When the last update was sent, and the initial social media backlash contained, Clara allowed herself a brief exhale. The immediate crisis was under control, and the client's confidence had been preserved. The team gathered their notes, murmuring quietly about the intensity of the afternoon and the clarity with which Clara had navigated it. Richard lingered, giving a small, rare smile. "You handled that exceptionally well," he said, voice calm yet filled with an unusual warmth. "Your team executed flawlessly, and the client's concerns were mitigated. Well done." Clara blinked, processing the praise. The man who had once made her question her abilities had not only acknowledged her competence, but had also actively worked to protect her. The realization settled in slow and profound. People can change, she thought. People really can. As she packed her notes, a subtle sense of wonder and disbelief lingered. She had confronted a high-stakes crisis and not only survived it, but thrived with Richard, now an ally rather than an adversary. The tension had been immense, the stakes higher than ever, yet the outcome revealed a truth she had long doubted. Growth for both individuals and relationships is possible even under the most unlikely circumstances. Clara stepped out of the strategy room, heart still racing from the adrenaline, mind buzzing with possibilities, and a quiet, profound realization settling like a warm weight in her chest. The suspense remained. Was this change permanent or a temporary adaptation? But for the first time in months she felt a tentative hope that the future could be different. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of Horizon Innovation's main conference room, casting a gentle glow over the assembled team. The crisis that had consumed the last 48 hours, the Jensen account debacle, had finally been brought under control. Clara Mitchell sat at the head of the table, a sense of quiet pride settling over her like a warm blanket. The air was still thick with adrenaline from yesterday's high-stakes maneuvers, but today carried a different energy resolution. The corrective social media campaigns had begun to take effect. Client communications had been clarified, and the initial storm of negative publicity had been calmed. Clara's strategy, executed with precision, had achieved the desired effect. Elise Graham leaned over, giving Clara a subtle approving nod. "You did it," she whispered, her voice tinged with genuine admiration. "They couldn't have asked for better leadership." Clara smiled faintly, though her mind was already replaying every critical decision, every adjustment, every late-night call that had led to this moment. Relief washed over her, mingling with a quiet satisfaction. For the first time in years, she felt the sense of professional competence untainted by doubt or criticism from above. Richard Caldwell entered the room, his presence commanding attention without overwhelming it. Clara felt the familiar stir of apprehension, but it was tempered by the knowledge of how he had acted during the crisis. He had not interfered unnecessarily, had not undermined her, and most importantly, had actively shielded the team from blame. Team Richard began, his tone measured and warm. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge the exceptional work done here over the past 2 days. Clara Mitchell has led this effort with remarkable skill, foresight, and poise. The client's concerns have been addressed, and the integrity of our strategy preserved. Your leadership ensured that no team member was unfairly burdened or blamed, and that approach has earned respect from all levels of management." A ripple of murmurs and smiles passed through the room. Clara felt a flush of pride, her pulse steadying. This was the acknowledgement she had longed for, the validation of her abilities, unclouded by the shadow of doubt that had followed her through Whitmore marketing. She realized with a small, quiet joy that she had not only survived the crisis, she had commanded it. The team clapped, not just out of politeness, but from genuine admiration. Colleagues who had watched her navigate tense negotiations and strategic recalibrations felt inspired, their own confidence buoyed by Clara's composure. Clara allowed herself a small, inward smile. The feeling was intoxicating, not for ego, but for the affirmation of her hard work and resilience. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You handled that brilliantly. I know how stressful it was, yet you remained calm, collected, and decisive. The client's trust in our capabilities has been reinforced entirely because of your leadership." Clara met his gaze, noting the sincerity there. His green eyes, once sharp with critique and authority, now reflected acknowledgement and respect. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady. "I couldn't have done it without the team, but your support yesterday made a difference." He nodded slightly, a rare gesture of quiet respect. There was no condescension, no expectation of loyalty, in exchange for praise, only recognition. Clara felt a subtle shift within her, a moment of catharsis where past frustrations dissolved, replaced by trust, however cautious in the present dynamic. As the meeting continued, colleagues approached her with congratulations and quiet acknowledgments of admiration. Each interaction reinforced the realization that her professional judgment was now recognized, valued, and trusted. Even junior team members who had watched her navigate challenges with precision and grace expressed confidence in her leadership. Clara felt a warmth she hadn't known in years, a sense of being fully seen and appreciated. Richard continued his remarks to the group, noting how the crisis had highlighted the importance of collaboration, communication, and trust. He cited specific moments where Clara's decision-making had averted potential disaster, emphasizing that leadership was not about asserting authority, but about empowering others to contribute their best. The acknowledgement was not performative. It was deliberate, measured, and entirely genuine. Clara, for her part, felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. The tension that had gripped her for weeks, the lingering anxiety from past experiences, had eased. She allowed herself to breathe fully for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The room seemed brighter, lighter, infused with possibility rather than dread. Later, as the team dispersed, Elise lingered at her side. "You've earned this," she said softly. "Not just the respect of your colleagues, but the kind of trust that lasts. Don't lose sight of that." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of those words. Trust had been scarce in her professional life, and to earn it not from fear, not from hierarchy, but from competence and integrity was a rare gift. She glanced toward Richard, who was now conferring quietly with a few team leads, and allowed herself a thought she had long suppressed: people could change. The mini-climactic resolution of the crisis had not only secured client confidence, but had also rewritten the internal narrative of Clara's career. She was no longer the cautious, defensive employee tiptoeing around judgment. She was a leader validated, empowered, and ready to embrace future challenges. A lingering suspense remained. Was this stability permanent? Or would the pressures of future crises reveal old patterns? Yet in this moment, Clara allowed herself to revel in accomplishment. She had faced adversity head-on, guided her team through turbulence, and emerged respected, recognized, and valued. The catharsis was complete, yet the story was not over. The potential for growth, for challenges ahead, and for continued proof of human change hovered just beyond the room, palpable and enticing. As she returned to her office, notebook closed and laptop resting quietly, Clara felt a deep, satisfying calm. She had navigated chaos, secured victory, and most importantly, had begun to see the human capacity for transformation in those around her. For the first time in years, Clara Mitchell felt fully aligned with her professional purpose, and cautiously she allowed herself to hope that the future might just hold more moments like this. Moments of respect, validation, and quiet triumph. The morning light filtered softly through the tall windows of Horizon Innovations, painting the open office in muted shades of blue and green. Clara Mitchell sat at her desk, coffee in hand, reviewing the final draft of a campaign proposal. She paused, realizing she wasn't bracing herself for criticism. No sharp comments, no undermining, just the calm hum of productivity surrounding her. Across the office, Richard Caldwell was reviewing strategic reports at his corner workstation. Their eyes met briefly, and he offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't the nod of superiority, nor the scrutinizing glare that had haunted her in the past. It was acknowledgement, a quiet signal of respect. Clara felt a flicker of ease, the tension that had once defined their interactions beginning to dissolve. Over the next several days, the subtle shift in their professional relationship became apparent. Richard asked questions, yes, but they were genuinely curious rather than confrontational. He deferred to Clara's expertise, consulting her on details only she could fully understand, and allowed her to take the lead in meetings, offering guidance rather than directives. Each interaction reinforced a simple, powerful truth: the old power dynamic, once rigid and suffocating, no longer existed. During a brainstorming session for a new client pitch, Clara noticed how he adjusted his approach. He leaned back slightly, arms uncrossed, allowing space for discussion. When she proposed an alternative strategy, he paused, considered it, and then responded thoughtfully. That approach has merit. Let's explore how we can integrate it with the client's objectives. The words were devoid of condescension, filled instead with measured respect. Clara felt a quiet swell of pride, realizing that her input was genuinely valued. Later in the hallway, she overheard a conversation between colleagues who hadn't been present for the Jensen account crisis. "I didn't expect him to handle that so well," one whispered. "And Clara, she was phenomenal." Clara smiled faintly, noting the indirect acknowledgement. For years, she had navigated environments where praise was scarce and recognition even scarcer. This, however, felt authentic, unpressured, and empowering. In private moments, Clara reflected on the contrast with her previous workplace. At Whitmore Marketing, every suggestion had been scrutinized, every initiative challenged without room for explanation. Here, the trust was reciprocal. Her skills recognized, her judgment relied upon, and her decisions respected. The subtle gestures, Richard pausing before interjecting, checking in on her progress without micromanaging, and publicly acknowledging her contributions, constructed a professional foundation she hadn't realized she had been craving. One afternoon, they were reviewing a preliminary draft of a multi-city campaign. Clara laid out her strategy, emphasizing creative storytelling over formulaic targeting. Richard listened intently, occasionally nodding, jotting down notes. When she finished, he looked up, eyes meeting hers. "You've anticipated challenges I hadn't considered. I'm impressed." It wasn't a compliment offered out of obligation. It was recognition earned and sincere. Clara felt warmth spread across her chest, tempered by cautious curiosity. Could this trust be sustainable? Had he truly changed, or was this a temporary adaptation following the Jensen crisis? The uncertainty lingered, but it no longer felt oppressive. Instead, it was a quiet invitation to test boundaries, to collaborate fully, and to explore the potential of a balanced, respectful professional relationship. Even routine interactions became opportunities for subtle acknowledgement. When she presented weekly progress reports, he listened with patience, occasionally interjecting with clarifying questions rather than critiques. During project handoffs, he double-checked resource allocation, only to support her team's efficiency, not to control outcomes. The accumulation of these gestures, small but consistent, created a rhythm of mutual respect. Clara found herself responding in kind, offering her insights freely and trusting that they would be received as intended. One evening, after a particularly demanding client call, Richard stopped by her desk. "You handled that exceptionally," he said quietly. "Your guidance kept the discussion productive and focused." Clara looked up, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. "Thank you," she replied. There was no hidden agenda, no expectation beyond the acknowledgement itself. Just a moment of professional validation, simple and profound. As she returned to her work, Clara allowed herself to reflect on the transformation. The anxiety and apprehension that had defined her initial encounters with him had shifted into a calm, measured curiosity. She could approach tasks without anticipating undermining, and she could voice ideas without fearing ridicule. The change was subtle, gradual, and consistent, a testament to effort and intention rather than luck. By the end of the week, the sense of professional equilibrium was palpable. The team operated smoothly, with Clara at the helm of her projects, Richard providing strategic oversight without interference, and colleagues responding to her leadership with enthusiasm. The environment was one of mutual reliance, where competence was acknowledged and collaboration flourished. Clara paused at her desk, gazing out the window at the city skyline, feeling a blend of relief and cautious optimism. The old office politics, the fear of arbitrary judgment, and the weight of unrecognized labor were behind her. In their place was trust, a fragile yet resilient construct that she and Richard had begun to cultivate together. She allowed herself a tentative thought, almost audibly, whispered in the quiet of her office. Perhaps it was possible for people to change genuinely and sustainably. And perhaps if such change could occur here, under such scrutiny, there might be a future where her professional and personal growth could proceed unimpeded in harmony rather than conflict. Yet even in this calm, an undercurrent of suspense lingered. Would the trust hold under mounting pressures? Could they sustain this equilibrium when stakes increased, when deadlines tightened, or when new challenges emerged? Clara's mind acknowledged these questions not with fear, but with a vigilant curiosity, the kind that accompanies those who have navigated adversity and emerged wiser. She settled back in her chair, fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to dive into the next project. Her reflections solidified. She was no longer subordinate in the shadows. She was recognized, respected, and capable. The professional battlefield had shifted, and Clara Mitchell was prepared to meet it head-on with cautious optimism and the knowledge that sometimes people could evolve in ways previously thought impossible. The office buzzed with a quiet energy that felt different from the usual weekday rhythm. Clara Mitchell walked through the open-plan space, noticing colleagues exchanging subtle smiles and nods of acknowledgement. Today was not just another day of meetings, reports, and deadlines. It was a day of recognition. The promotion she had quietly anticipated, yet never dared to fully imagine, was now official. She would lead Horizon Innovation's creative team. The announcement had come directly from upper management, an endorsement of her vision, leadership, and the strategic direction she had championed since joining the company. Clara paused for a moment, her hand brushing against the sleek doorframe of her new office. It was hers now, a space larger than she had ever had, with a window overlooking the city park and sunlight streaming in, illuminating the canvas of possibilities before her. Elise Graham appeared at her side, holding a cup of coffee as though it were a ceremonial offering. "Well," Elise said softly, her voice warm and approving, "this is about as official as it gets. They've recognized everything you've done, Clara. All the strategy, the leadership, the long nights. It's yours." Clara took a deep breath, letting the reality settle over her. Pride mingled with relief, tempered by the quiet memory of Whitmore marketing and the years of restraint, criticism, and doubt. She had worked tirelessly, but it had been more than just hard work. It had been integrity, patience, and the courage to trust her own judgment. As she moved toward her desk, she noticed her team gathering, a mix of excitement and genuine admiration in their eyes. The room seemed to shimmer with the collective sense of anticipation and joy. "Congratulations, Clara," someone called, and a ripple of applause followed. Her heart swelled not just from the recognition, but from the knowledge that her success was shared with those who had worked alongside her, believed in her ideas, and trusted her direction. Richard Caldwell appeared in the doorway, a small approving smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Clara felt a flicker of the old tension, quickly tempered by the understanding she had gained over the past weeks. This was different. His presence no longer carried intimidation, it carried acknowledgement. "Well deserved," he said simply. "The team will thrive under your leadership." The mini-climax of the day arrived in a quiet, intimate meeting with upper management. Clara presented her strategic vision for the next quarter, outlining creative initiatives, marketing campaigns, and ways to empower her team while maintaining client satisfaction. She spoke with confidence, measured, yet passionate, weaving in insights drawn from both her experiences and the lessons learned under Richard's evolving leadership. As she finished, the executives exchanged glances, nodding in approval. Clara, one of them, began, "Your approach demonstrates not just creativity but a remarkable capacity to lead. You've earned our trust, and more importantly, you've earned the respect of your team. We fully support your leadership." The words resonated deeply, a crescendo of affirmation that Clara had longed for, quietly, patiently, and diligently. It was a payoff for the risks she had taken, the boundaries she had drawn, and the courage she had shown in standing by her professional principles. Pride swelled within her, not arrogance, not entitlement, but a profound satisfaction that integrity, diligence, and vision could indeed be recognized and rewarded. Returning to her office, Clara allowed herself a private moment of reflection. She remembered the resignation letter she had typed 3 months ago. The fear and anticipation mingled with determination. She remembered walking away from Whitmore Marketing, stepping into the unknown and trusting that her skills, instincts, and perseverance would carry her forward. And now, standing in the light of accomplishment, she realized that each moment of courage, each decision to remain true to herself, had brought her here. Her team arrived shortly afterward, curious and eager to discuss upcoming projects under her direction. Clara greeted each person with a genuine smile, assigning responsibilities and sharing her vision with clarity and enthusiasm. The room responded with energy, collaboration, and a renewed sense of purpose. It was a different kind of leadership than she had ever experienced, a partnership rather than command, and inspiration rather than enforcement. Richard lingered at the edge of the office, observing quietly. Clara felt a brief flash of the old apprehension, tempered immediately by the acknowledgement of his subtle but consistent support over the past weeks. He didn't interfere. He didn't assert control. Instead, he trusted her, demonstrating through action that the professional dynamic had transformed. Clara allowed herself a small, inward smile, the recognition of a relationship that had evolved as much as her own professional journey. The afternoon carried on with a series of team briefings, project planning sessions, and strategy discussions. Each moment seemed infused with a sense of celebration, though understated. There were no trumpets, no grand fanfare, just the tangible, resonant acknowledgement of achievement. Clara felt light, energized, and profoundly grateful. She knew that success was rarely solitary. It was shared, nurtured, and amplified by those who believed in her, collaborated with her, and trusted her vision. As the workday drew to a close, Clara lingered at her desk, notebook, open pen in hand, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The combination of pride, joy, and inspiration swirled within her, tempered by the awareness that leadership carried responsibility, challenges, and the need for continual growth. She understood that today's recognition was both a milestone and a starting point, the affirmation of what she had achieved and the invitation to continue shaping her team's future. Before leaving, she cast one last glance around the office, catching the sunset's golden light illuminating the collaborative space. In that moment, Clara Mitchell felt a rare and exquisite alignment. Professional success harmonized with personal validation, courage met with reward, and her integrity affirmed in the eyes of those she respected. Yet, even amidst this triumph, the story was not entirely complete. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, and new opportunities to prove that trust, skill, and vision were enduring qualities, not just fleeting recognition. The evening sun cast a gentle glow across the city, streaming through the tall windows of Horizon Innovations and bathing the office in amber light. Clara Mitchell lingered at her desk, finalizing notes for a campaign strategy, though her mind was only partially focused. Across the office, Richard Caldwell had stayed behind, reviewing the day's progress reports with quiet concentration. Their workstations were separated by a modest expanse, yet the proximity felt charged not with tension as it had once been, but with a subtle, unspoken awareness. Clara paused, reflecting on the weeks since her promotion. The professional respect Richard had shown, the trust he had placed in her leadership, had slowly reshaped the dynamic between them. There was an ease in their interactions, now a rhythm of mutual acknowledgement that had previously been unthinkable. And with this ease came something new, a warmth, a fleeting yet persistent curiosity that extended beyond the parameters of work. She caught him glancing in her direction, eyes meeting hers briefly. He offered a small half-smile, and Clara felt the faintest flutter of sensation in her chest. It wasn't intimidation, it wasn't scrutiny, it was recognition, subtle and personal. A moment stretched, held delicately between them, before he returned to his notes. Clara exhaled quietly, a tension she hadn't realized she was carrying easing ever so slightly. After work, the office emptied slowly, leaving a quieter, softer space. Clara gathered her things, noting Richard's presence at the door, waiting with his coat in hand. Heading out, he asked casually, though his tone carried an undercurrent of attention. She nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes, long day. You?" "Same," he replied, securing his briefcase. "Though I was hoping to catch a few moments to discuss next week's strategy." His words were professional, yet there was a gentleness beneath the surface, a hint of personal investment. Clara recognized it immediately, a subtle acknowledgement of their shared commitment and mutual respect. As they walked toward the elevator, their conversation meandered naturally between work topics and small personal observations. Richard mentioned a new cafe that had opened nearby, a place with quiet nooks and strong coffee. Clara found herself intrigued, suggesting they might try it together, strictly for professional discussion, of course. Richard's agreement carried a warmth in his smile, and Clara felt a curious lightness she hadn't experienced in years. On the elevator, silence settled between them for a moment, neither awkward nor forced. It was a pause, intimate in its neutrality, where shared glances and subtle expressions conveyed more than words could capture. Clara's thoughts drifted. The man standing beside her was the same Richard Caldwell who had once unsettled her with every glance and critique, yet he had changed, or perhaps she had learned to see him differently. The recognition of growth, both his and her own, made her chest feel full, charged with cautious anticipation. Walking out into the crisp evening air, they moved side by side, discussing minor logistical details of upcoming campaigns, but the rhythm of their steps, the cadence of their voices, hinted at a connection beyond the office. Clara noticed small gestures, how he subtly adjusted his pace to match hers, the way he allowed her to lead the conversation, the patience in his responses. Each movement was a quiet demonstration of consideration, an unspoken respect that had been absent before. Later, Clara found herself replaying moments from the past week. The collaborative problem-solving, the subtle nods of approval, and the occasional fleeting smiles had accumulated into a new pattern, one that made her feel both valued and unexpectedly seen. She recognized that her admiration for him was evolving into something warmer, more personal, yet she was careful to maintain boundaries to honor the professional foundation that had allowed this trust to flourish. That evening, after a team dinner celebrating a successful campaign launch, Clara and Richard lingered in the lobby, discussing potential adjustments for a client presentation. The space around them had emptied, leaving only the hum of the building's air circulation and the soft reflection of city lights in the windows. Clara noticed a subtle shift in the conversation, more relaxed, more attuned to personal perspectives than strictly professional imperatives. She realized with a start that she looked forward to these moments, to the thoughtful, understated interactions that seemed to bridge professional collaboration with something quietly intimate. Richard offered to walk her to her car. On the way, they shared anecdotes about their weekend plans, favorite coffee spots, and small discoveries about the city they hadn't explored before. Clara laughed softly at a humorous observation he made, and Richard's smile mirrored hers, warm and genuine. The tension that had once defined their encounters was entirely absent, replaced by a gentle anticipation, a mutual curiosity about the person standing beside them beyond the confines of work. As they reached her car, Richard hesitated briefly, then said, "I appreciate the way you've handled everything lately, Clara. Your leadership, it's remarkable." She felt a surge of warmth, pride, mingling with a delicate spark of something more. "Thank you, Richard," she replied, voice soft but steady. "I couldn't have done it without the trust you've shown me." The exchange was balanced, professional, yet imbued with subtle connection. Clara watched as he walked back toward the building, a part of her reluctant to let the moment end yet, understanding the importance of maintaining boundaries. She felt a quiet thrill, a flutter of anticipation tempered by wisdom, recognizing that their professional respect had created the conditions for a deeper, gradual understanding to develop. Alone in her car, Clara exhaled slowly, reflecting on the day. Her admiration had shifted subtly into something more personal, tinged with curiosity and the potential for emotional connection. Yet she also acknowledged the need for patience, for continued observation, and for maintaining the professional balance that had made this transformation possible. As she drove home, city lights blurring past, Clara allowed herself to smile, quietly optimistic and slightly vulnerable. The foundation of trust, respect, and shared experience had opened a door, one she was both eager and cautious to explore. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to navigate this intricate dance of professional achievement and personal connection. The balance was delicate, the stakes real, and the possibilities compelling. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of Horizon Innovations, painting the office in a warm, soft glow that seemed to breathe life into every corner. Clara Mitchell sat at her desk reviewing the latest campaign proposals with a calm focus. Her team moved around her, exchanging ideas and notes in the collaborative hum that had become the rhythm of the office. She felt an unusual sense of clarity and control, a confidence that came not from authority but from mastery of her craft and trust in those around her. Richard Caldwell entered the space quietly, a stack of reports in hand. He nodded in greeting, not with the weight of oversight but with the subtle acknowledgement of partnership. Clara returned the nod, recognizing the evolution in both of them. Their dynamic had shifted profoundly from tension and distrust to collaboration and respect. He approached her desk, lowering his voice to a conversational tone. "Clara, the preliminary strategy looks excellent. I've added a few points for consideration, but it's clear the team is in capable hands." She smiled, a mixture of pride and ease. "Thank you, Richard. I've incorporated the team's feedback. Everyone contributed ideas, and I wanted to ensure their insights shaped the final approach." The words flowed naturally, confident yet unpretentious. She could feel the empowerment radiating through her, a validation not only of her skills but of her judgment and leadership style. Throughout the morning, Clara facilitated discussions, guided brainstorming sessions, and encouraged her colleagues to challenge assumptions and explore creative solutions. Her leadership was marked by inclusivity and patience, and the atmosphere reflected it: energy, engagement, and genuine enthusiasm. Every nod, every thoughtful question, every note taken by team members reinforced the sense that her direction was trusted, respected, and valued. Richard observed from the periphery, occasionally stepping in with strategic insights, but never dominating the conversation. His presence was supportive, a subtle reinforcement of confidence rather than a reminder of past control. Clara noticed the contrast keenly. The man who had once undermined her with critique now functioned as a collaborator, providing guidance without assertion, encouragement without overreach. By mid-afternoon, the office had settled into a rhythm of productive focus. Clara's mind wandered briefly to her journey: the resignation from Whitmore Marketing, the trepidation of starting anew, the careful navigation of professional boundaries with Richard, and the moments of trust and respect that had gradually transformed her work environment. Each experience had contributed to the confident, empowered professional she was now becoming. The mini-climax of the day arrived during a strategy presentation for a key client. Clara led the discussion, articulating the rationale behind every recommendation, highlighting potential risks, and demonstrating the creative opportunities her team had identified. Richard sat quietly observing, occasionally nodding or offering a brief clarification, but leaving the spotlight entirely to her. She felt the authority in her voice, the clarity in her explanations, and the unspoken confidence that came from having navigated past challenges and emerged stronger. The client responded enthusiastically, praising the depth of analysis, the creativity of the proposals, and the professionalism of the team. Clara felt a swell of pride tempered by gratitude for the collaborative spirit that had made this success possible. When the meeting concluded, Richard placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of support and acknowledgement, and she felt an affirmation that extended beyond words. As the day progressed, Clara reflected on the growth she had witnessed in both herself and Richard. He had become a leader capable of recognizing talent, respecting autonomy, and supporting success without micromanaging. She had become a leader who trusted her instincts, empowered her team, and balanced assertiveness with empathy. The transformation in both of them was palpable, a full arc of personal and professional evolution. Later, during a quiet moment in the office, Clara reviewed the week's accomplishments and set goals for the upcoming campaigns. The satisfaction she felt was deep and steady, not fleeting pride, but the assurance that her efforts, insight, and judgment were truly valued. The empowerment she experienced radiated outward, influencing her team's motivation and shaping a workplace culture rooted in respect, creativity, and collaboration. Richard approached her again, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Take a break," he said softly, offering 1 cup. Clara accepted with a grateful smile. They stepped toward the window, watching the city below, bathed in the soft hues of late afternoon. Conversation drifted from work details to lighter topics, weekend plans, recent discoveries in the city, and subtle shared humor that signaled growing ease between them. Clara felt warmth in the connection, a gentle curiosity and admiration for the man who had changed as much as she had. Their relationship was evolving, grounded in mutual respect and trust, a partnership that acknowledged boundaries while hinting at deeper personal understanding. She realized that the challenges, the tension, and the careful navigation of past dynamics had created the space for authentic connection to emerge. As the evening approached, Clara returned to her desk to finalize the day's work. She glanced at the team now, winding down, and felt a deep sense of hope. The transformation she had undergone, mirrored in Richard's evolution, offered not only professional fulfillment but also the possibility of personal growth. She understood that leadership was more than strategy and execution. It was about fostering trust, encouraging potential, and cultivating relationships that honored both competence and character. The office lights dimmed slightly as the sun set, casting long shadows and soft golden hues across the room. Clara lingered, reflecting on the journey from uncertainty and restraint to confidence and empowerment. She felt the quiet affirmation of her own growth and the promise of continued development both for herself and for those around her. And though the day was ending, the sense of anticipation for what lay ahead, the opportunities, the challenges, and the evolving connections remained alive, leaving the story poised on the cusp of new possibilities. The late afternoon sunlight spilled across the skyline, casting long golden reflections on the glass walls of Horizon Innovations. Clara Mitchell stood in her corner office, leaning slightly against the wide desk, her eyes tracing the city below. The hum of the office was muted now, most employees having left for the day, leaving a tranquil calm that felt almost sacred. She held a warm cup of coffee, the aroma grounding her in the moment. Every detail of the office, the soft teal walls, the carefully curated local artwork, the vibrant greenery reminded her of how far she had come. 3 years of relentless pressure under Richard Caldwell at Whitmore Marketing felt like a lifetime ago, a chapter closed but not forgotten. She could recall the sting of his critiques, the way her ideas had been dismissed without thought, the silent humiliation in boardroom meetings. Each memory still carried a pang, but it was now tempered with perspective and strength. Clara breathed deeply, letting the contrast between then and now wash over her. She had chosen courage over comfort, freedom over fear, and the results were tangible. A thriving career, a creative team she respected, and a professional environment that nurtured growth rather than suppressed it. Richard entered quietly, the soft click of his polished shoes on the floor, the only announcement of his presence. Clara turned, offering a calm smile. He returned it, his green eyes catching hers, with a warmth that was almost imperceptible but entirely genuine. Still savoring the view, he asked lightly, his tone casual, but carrying an undercurrent of camaraderie. "Something like that," Clara replied, setting her cup down. "It feels right, finally." Her voice carried the subtle weight of reflection and triumph, an acknowledgement of the journey she had undertaken to arrive at this point. He stepped closer, holding a thin portfolio. "I wanted to discuss a new initiative," he said. "It's ambitious cross-department collaboration on a project that could redefine how we approach client engagement. I can't think of anyone better to co-lead it with me than you." Clara felt a familiar twinge of anticipation, the mix of excitement and responsibility that had always accompanied new challenges. She studied the portfolio briefly, then met his gaze steadily. "I'm in," she said. The words were decisive, a testament to the confidence she had cultivated over months of proving herself, leading her team, and navigating complex corporate dynamics. Richard smiled, a subtle acknowledgement of her commitment and capability. "I'm glad." And he added, his voice lowering slightly, "I think this is a great opportunity for us to continue to learning from each other." The emphasis, delicate yet deliberate, carried an unspoken weight. Clara's pulse quickened, the hint of personal significance threading through the professional proposal. She considered the implications carefully, allowing herself a private moment of acknowledgement. Richard Caldwell had transformed in ways she had once thought impossible. His approach was collaborative, supportive, and respectful. The man before her was nothing like the authoritarian figure who had once cast a shadow over her confidence. And yet, the spark of something more personal lingered in the subtext of his words and gestures, a subtle invitation, unforced, gentle. Turning her attention back to the cityscape, Clara allowed herself a small smile. She had reclaimed her career, navigated the treacherous waters of corporate hierarchy, and built something meaningful from the foundation of her own skills and integrity. More than that, she had preserved her agency, maintaining control over her choices, her boundaries, and her ambitions. Every challenge faced, every sleepless night of doubt, every moment of tension and confrontation had led to this sense of full-circle resolution. Richard moved beside her, glancing at the skyline. "You know," he said softly, "I've seen a lot of people rise to the occasion, but few with the clarity and composure you've shown. You've earned every bit of respect and trust, Clara." The praise, warm and sincere, resonated deeply. Clara felt the culmination of her efforts crystallize into a quiet, powerful joy. There was no arrogance in her satisfaction, no need for external validation beyond the recognition of competence and integrity she had cultivated within herself. It was a moment of catharsis, the release of tension from past injustices, the affirmation of personal worth, and the embrace of a future defined by choice and capability. Richard paused, then added with a slight teasing lilt, "And I hope you'll let me continue learning from you too, both in work and other ways, if that's agreeable." The subtlety of the comment was not lost on Clara. She could feel the playful undertone, the acknowledgement of mutual admiration, and the careful hint of personal interest, all presented with the restraint and respect that had come to define their evolving relationship. Clara laughed softly, a sound rich with relief and joy. "I think we can manage that," she said, allowing the words to carry both humor and sincerity. She felt a flutter of anticipation tempered by a steadfast awareness of her boundaries and a deep respect for the journey that had brought them both here. The evening light shifted, bathing the room in a soft amber glow. Clara returned her gaze to the city, feeling an expansive sense of possibility. She had rebuilt her professional life, forged authentic connections, and discovered that courage, patience, and integrity could lead not only to success, but to fulfillment in unexpected ways. The past was behind her. The present was rich with achievement and respect. The future, full of promise and opportunity, beckoned with quiet insistence. Richard reached out, gently tapping the portfolio against the desk. "Shall we get started on this new adventure?" he asked, his tone casual but charged with meaning. Clara met his eyes, her smile steady and radiant. "Let's do it." In that moment, she felt fully aligned with her life, her career, and the subtle but undeniable currents of her heart. She had navigated challenges, confronted fear, reclaimed her power, and now stood on the threshold of the next chapter, strong, capable, and unshakably herself. As she returned to her work, a sense of satisfaction and completeness lingered, a quiet triumph, interwoven with anticipation for the unfolding days. She knew that every challenge ahead would be met with the confidence, wisdom, and grace she had cultivated. And just beyond the horizon of the city, possibilities shimmered, infinite and inviting. Sometimes healing begins where we least expect it, amid the tension of old wounds and the uncertainty of new beginnings. Clara's journey reminds us that courage isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's the quiet choice to step away from what diminishes us, to protect our worth, and to trust that a better path exists even if we can't yet see it. It's also a gentle reminder that people can change often in ways that surprise us. The same person who once caused pain can, under the right circumstances and with honest reflection, become someone who inspires respect and even admiration. But transformation requires patience and discernment. We don't need to surrender our boundaries or ignore past hurts. We can acknowledge growth while maintaining our dignity and self-respect. Ultimately, life often presents opportunities for both professional and personal renewal. When we embrace them with integrity, empathy, and courage, we discover not just success but a deeper sense of peace and connection. Clara's story is a quiet celebration of resilience, of holding on to hope, and of finding light in places we once feared. It encourages us to believe in our own strength and in the possibility of second chances, both for ourselves and for those around us. Thank you for being here with us. Your time, your attention, and your presence mean more than words can say. Every story we share is meant to touch hearts, inspire hope, and remind us of the power of courage, kindness, and understanding. Every like, share, and subscribe helps us continue this journey, bringing more stories that celebrate resilience, empathy, and the quiet strength within us all. By staying with us, you're not just watching, you're helping spread moments of connection and light to people who need them. We're grateful for you, and we can't wait to share the next story that uplifts, heals, and reminds us of the beauty in every human journey.